All right, good morning, everybody. How are we all doing today? So, you celebrate Father's Day, is that correct? And it's on Sunday? I did a little research yesterday to understand some of the background related to Father's Day. I wanted to understand how it got to be a holiday, if you will, that is so popular and celebrated worldwide. And it's been around for maybe 500 years. But about 100 years ago, there were a couple of individuals who wanted to recognize men who were being good fathers. And they wanted to promote the fact that these men were being really good fathers. And they eventually, through years of trial and error, they ended up aligning with a retail trade organization. And this retail trade organization was struggling in June to sell stuff, especially men's merchandise. And so these women partnered with a retail trade organization, and the retail trade organization then promoted men's merchandise in June through Father's Day as a way to grow their volume in summer when they were having difficulty selling stuff. And it took about 20 years of constant reminders and trying to get people to recognize this was a selling holiday. Radio stations used to criticize this movement, saying it was a crass form of commercialism. And then after about 20 years of constant reminders, as a generation got used to that, Father's Day became a holiday. And then it became a holiday when you had to sell stuff. And today, we all have plans. If we sell men's apparel or we sell something similar for men, we all have plans to try and capitalize on this holiday. Okay? So Father's Day is an event. It's something then that you build around and try to sell merchandise for that event. And that is a very different style of marketing than having best practices regarding a website. So as we go through this presentation this morning, I'm going to talk some about what it is that we've been doing for the past 10 or 15 years. I'm going to probably be critical of how well it has performed for us. And then I'm going to talk about what some of my other clients are doing to be more successful. I work with about 200 different companies over the course of the past 10 years. And I get to see every transaction from these companies' databases. So I get to see why customers purchased. I get to see how often they purchased. I get to see how good the company does at bringing in new customers. I get to see how good of a job the company does at retaining customers. And after about 7 or 8 years of constantly going through what I would call a data-driven approach to try and grow my clients' customer bases and having failure after failure, I kind of saw the light, and I figured out what it was that the successful companies were doing and what it is they were doing that were different than everybody else. So I just want to start by talking a little bit about the state of commerce right now. So I consider e-commerce to be Amazon. In the United States, 1 out of every $3 that is sold through e-commerce is Amazon. So they are it. And we are not competing with them. I will visit clients, and the clients are consistently telling me how hard they're working to compete with Amazon. They're not competing with Amazon. Amazon wiped them out. So they are competing with somebody else. And if we think we're going to compete with Amazon by having better prices and having a better focus on our business and really focusing on the details, we're going to have a hard time growing. I have several clients that are standalone e-commerce businesses. And these companies are rapidly selling out to large brands right now. And what has happened when I analyzed their data is they were able to grow their new customers by 15 or 20% a year, every year, which fueled their growth. And about 2 or 3 years ago, that rate of growth stopped. And their ability to find new customers became only 5% more than last year. And they can see the writing on the wall. They can see the end of the line, and they can see that their growth, which has gone on forever, is flattening out. And so before everybody else figures out that that's happening, they're selling, okay? So that's not a good sign for the rest of us either. Traditional retail, where I come from in the United States, is being decimated. There are going to be 8,000 store closures this year, the most ever since the Great Recession, probably the most since early 2000s. And it's being wiped out for several reasons, which I'll get to in a few minutes. But we have made a series of decisions as business leaders that are facilitating the closing of stores today. The decisions we made over the past 5 to 10 years are now having negative repercussions. And across my catalog client base, what is happening is a consistent aging of the customer. So for every year that passes, the customer base is aging a year. And this trend just keeps accelerating at the same rate. My average client catalog client where I measure the age of the customer, where there's demographic data, 64 years old. And that used to be 54 years old 10 years ago. So if I project that ahead 10 years, what does that tell me? It tells me I'm going to have to make some pretty significant changes, doesn't it? I shared this slide, and you're not going to be able to read what's on the slide, but this was given to me by a paper representative in 2001 when I worked at Nordstrom. And we were going through our planning process and trying to figure out who we were going to mail and not mail, and we decided we were going to cut back on our circulation by about 25%, and we had data that showed customers were buying online. And the paper rep gave me this from McKinsey Consulting Group, and it showed that if a customer buys from catalogs and buys from online and buys from retail, the customer is going to spend 8 times as much as a customer who buys from a single channel. And the paper rep told me, you're stupid to make the decisions you're making. If anything, you should be spending more on paper and more on catalogs, not less. So we had a difference of opinion about where we were going to take our business. But this was the kind of messaging we were all told for many years. And that kind of messaging that the customer's going to spend 8 times as much never came to fruition, did it? So we're constantly being met with messages that stores are closing and business isn't performing well. All the stores you shopped at as a teen are going bankrupt. A popular company in the United States, J. Crew, from 5-6 years ago, they were at the top of the world. Now they've fired their management team. They're closing stores. They're laying people off. You look at any storefront, there's just a constant message of doom. You're getting constant messaging that you should take 30% off or 40% off, and you're told you should do this to compete with somebody else. I mean, on what planet does it make sense to constantly discount and devalue the merchandise we're selling? Because at some point, we still have to pay the same amount to get the merchandise, right? But we're constantly trying to figure out what promotion to use to encourage somebody to shop. So these promotions obviously haven't worked, because if they did work, our industry would be growing at a rapid rate. Sales have become a cancer for department stores. So I talked about Father's Day before. That's an event. And retailers, instead of creating their events or creating reasons for customers to shop, created sale events. And there's a difference. They've decided to tell the customer that the only reason you should shop with us is because we're selling something cheaper today than we sold it yesterday. Over time, this has a cumulative effect that actually hurts how customers respond from us. This came from a project that I did, I think it was back in January. I worked for a large catalog brand. And this catalog brand, they were going 40 to 50% off during the Christmas season last year. And what happened was they had a group of items that were winning items, that had been winning items for the past 5 or 6 years. They sold them at $35. And then they were introducing a new line of products, and the new line of products they were introducing was generally at $45. It was more expensive. And the customer hated the new line of products. So then management responded by taking 40% off. Now you had the item that used to be at $35, but at 40% off, that item is $26 now. And with a $15 cost of goods, they just gave up half of their profit on an item that was selling well to facilitate selling items where the price was artificially raised too high and nobody wanted them. So it creates this double whammy. And this spring, they're having a hard time now selling the items that used to sell at $35 because we trained the customer to expect those items to be worth $26. My client base is doing this, and it's rampant. It's constantly happening everywhere you look. So we're taking all the things we're doing that are successful, and we're tainting them because of the activities we're doing that are not successful. Or we make management changes, and management decides to swing the business at a 180-degree level. This would be Land's End. They sell here in the UK. They're big in the United States. They brought in a new CEO. The new CEO said, we're a fashion company. Switch the merchandise assortment, switch the messaging. Sales dropped 15%. She was gone in under 2 years. And now they're starting over. And they have a 15% hole they have to dig out of. So we can't make wild swings either. I have measured social media performance over and over and over again. I have e-commerce clients where the average customer is about 25 to 35 years old, and social media will be accountable for 40% of their sales. And you go and talk to their management team, and everything they're doing is about social and digital and growing their business. I got data yesterday, I analyzed it last night in the hotel from a company where they had this huge 2-year process to try and grow their business through social, and they got 0.1% of their sales that they attributed to activities in social media. So there is a demographic difference. And what we're told all the time is that we have to do certain things to be relevant and to have a growing, healthy business. And then you actually look at the actual data, and it tells you that there is a group of customers somewhere between the ages of about 35 and 45, and it's a bridge. And customers that are older than that behave a certain way, and I'm generalizing here. Customers under 40 or so behave very differently, and you can't apply the methods from one to the other necessarily. So we're constantly making mistakes there. Another thing, in my opinion, that has really hurt us is what I call Google Analytics. So if you go into Google Analytics, and if I show of hands, how many of you have Google Analytics or have used it? Okay, so there it is, most of the room. So most of the room is proficient at either using this software application or at least is familiar with it. Almost everything you are doing is to measure short-term return on investment. So you're looking at where traffic comes from, you're looking at how that traffic converts, you're making decisions in near real time to figure out what you're going to do. Let me ask a different question. How many of you know whether when you acquire a customer, it is worth breaking even on that customer, waiting 1 year for that customer to pay you back, or waiting 5 years for the customer to pay you back? Show of hands, how many of you know the answer to that? Okay, so maybe 15% of the room knows the answer to that, but 85% of the room has Google Analytics and could tell you how quickly a visitor from Twitter converts when they come to the website. So what we're doing is we're optimizing all of these little short-term things that have a very small half-life, and we're not focusing on the longer-term things, which is going to cause our business to either grow or succeed. We're not focusing on those things. Okay? So I'll ask the question, is it possible that we've been taught the wrong things? And the answer is yes. So after client visit after client visit, after analyzing the actual customer transactions from 200 different clients over the course of the past 10 years, I am convinced we have been taught the wrong things. And because we've been taught this now for 15 years, and it becomes part of the DNA of who we are, and it becomes part of the DNA of the industry. And if you're a trade journal and you want customers to click on your content so that advertisers pay you, you have to write about these topics. And so we've gone down a path where we're focusing on a certain level of things, and it's good because then we all have a common language and we all understand each other, but I'm not convinced it's good for business, because if it was good for business, all of our businesses would be growing. There are things that we did not focus on over the past 10 or 15 years that are hurting us, okay? We were told we were supposed to align all of our channels. All the channels should be very similar. It should be a great customer experience across every single channel. Everything should fit together into a nice, great, big, wonderful, integrated experience. If that was the case, our customers would be spending more with us, our businesses would all be growing, and the theme of conferences like today would be very different. So we did not prioritize customer acquisition, did we? I mean, if you think about all the things we're doing, we're talking about engaging with a customer, and we're using technology to get a customer to spend more, to convert. We're constantly talking about existing customers, and we very rarely talk about finding new ones. We completely ignored creativity. I'm going to show a few examples in a little bit, but we have spent, everybody in this room talking about using Google Analytics. It means that we're really good at the numbers. The creativity part of our business has disappeared, and it's disappeared because we're focusing on numbers. So anything that's creative and doesn't work in the short term with a short half-life, we abandon, and we focus everything on the stuff that is working right now. And at the bottom of this here, I said we did not prioritize merchandising brilliance. Over and over and over again, and I'm going to share this in a minute, I'm constantly running into clients that have just basically ignored merchandise to focus on all the digital activities they're doing to try and grow their business. And what's happening is they're driving customers to their website, the customer gets to the website, and it's the same boring stuff they've been selling for 10 years, and the customer walks away. Then what they see is that the customer who does buy, they look at that customer and go, oh my gosh, that customer received a catalog. Therefore, catalogs are working. And then they look at what is it in the catalog, what's selling in the catalog, and it's stuff that 62-year-old customers like. And so they say, well, as a merchandising team, we got to get more of that stuff that 62-year-old customers like. That process drives away the 29-year-old customer because the merchandise is not aligned with who that customer is, and we just get ourselves in this cycle where we're not really helping the long-term health of our business. Okay? You won't be able to see the table here, but I measure. There's this buzz around customers who buy from multiple channels are better customers. And so what I'll do is I'll measure a customer who bought twice online, twice through a catalog, twice in a store, twice online. And I'll compare it to somebody who bought 4 times in a store and 0 times digitally. And what you see is there's almost no difference in what the customer spends. So what happens is over the past 10 or 15 years, we haven't gotten customers to spend more to place that additional order that we've been told is really helpful. So customers are buying the same amount of times they've always bought, and the end result of all of that is that the customer is no more valuable, but we've increased all the complexity of our business to accommodate additional channels. So we listened to the buzz in the business, and that didn't help us. Another thing that I saw, this is actual data from a client, okay? And this client had customers who repurchased at about a 34% rate year over year. So their business was struggling. They were having a hard time growing the business. And so management decided to make a decision. Management decided to cut back on customer acquisition significantly. When they cut back on customer acquisition, at the very time they did that, the merchandising team figured out what was wrong with the business. And the merchandising team fixed the business. And they were able to get on a comparable group of customers, they got customers to spend 20% more. I mean, that's hard to do. I almost never see that. But the marketing team, because they were jaded, cut back on customer acquisition by 20%. And because most of their customers come in through customer acquisition, this business had sales shrink for 2 consecutive years after the merchandising team figured out what was wrong. So this was a problem that was caused by the marketing team. The marketing team caused the business to sink after the merchandising team fixed it. And it happens because there's not a discipline for understanding customer acquisition and figuring out what to do with it. And now, worst of anything, customer acquisition is based off of what I would call toll keepers. Google and Facebook have basically cornered the market on customer acquisition. If you're a cataloger, to some extent, the co-ops have done that as well. Okay? But in general, Google and Facebook own every customer, and if you want that customer, you're going to pay for it. So every time you want to do something from a customer acquisition standpoint, you got to pay your nickel. And you have to keep paying, or pay your 50 cents per click, and you keep paying somebody. Well, how is it that you can grow and invest money in different things if you're constantly paying Google, Facebook, and co-ops money? Where's the rest of your money come from so that you can experiment and try different things? That makes it very difficult. And in my projects repeatedly, I do what I call simulations, okay? So I will analyze the age of a customer that is brought on for a cataloger in particular. I will look at the customers that are brought on from co-ops, and I'll compare them to customers that are brought on through Google and Facebook. And I'll see that the customer brought on through traditional catalog marketing is oftentimes 10 years older than the customer that comes on through digital means. The customer who is 10 years older has different merchandising preferences than the customer who comes on from Google and Facebook. And so as a result, all of our things that we're measuring tell us that a certain customer is responding through print, and therefore we merchandise the catalog to optimize that part of the business. Those things, because of the way we're doing them, then reflect online. And when they're online, a customer who's 38 years old comes to visit our business somehow through Google or Facebook or some other way, and they're appalled by what they see because it's a generation removed from what they want to buy, and they don't buy from us. So then we go into Google Analytics and we look at all that traffic from Google and Facebook and say, oh, that didn't work very well, but these customers did work well, and we get into this feedback loop, and we're moving our merchandise assortment far away. So I run simulations, and I will say, what would happen to a catalog business if over the course of 5 years, all we did was find customers through digital means? And it's fascinating because the whole business changes. I'll look at the sales by merchandise category over 5 years, and the sales categories that the Google and Facebook customer like go way up. The sales categories that the catalog customer likes go way down. Then I'll reverse the simulation and say, what happens if we only get customers through catalog acquisition methods, and the business looks identical? So it tells us that our preconceived notions of how we should run a business, and it should be integrated, and everything should be tied together, are causing us to get an outcome that is different than we would get if we tried something, tried a less integrated approach. And in retail, this really hurts us. We have spent 15 years telling the customer to engage with us digitally. For my average retail client, if 7 people walk into the store, 1 customer buys something. And what we told the customer, that's not acceptable. The customer should be able to shop however she wants. And that website is open 24/7, 365. It is always available. And the customer, instead of going and getting in the car, driving to the store, and having a 14% chance of buying something, we traded that off and told the customer to sit at home and online have a 3% chance of buying something. And over the course of 15 years, that trade-off, over and over and over again, and that training of the customer with 5 emails a week telling you to buy now, and to buy now online, that has trained the customer to say that stores are not the place to go. And so we shouldn't be surprised when retail sales are struggling, because we told the customer not to shop there. So we have done that to ourselves. And then we end up like a dinosaur. We should not be surprised that it's difficult right now to grow through a catalog and it's difficult to grow a retail store, because we have told the customer for the past 15 years to ignore that and to focus on our digital channels. So we have done that to ourselves. And then you look at Facebook. I read this last week, so I quickly got this in my slide, so I don't expect you to look at all the details there, especially if you're sitting in the back. But Facebook announced that they are spending 60% of their advertising budget is on television. So I want you to think about that. All the messages that you get are telling you to do digital things. And the company that's as digital as any other company that's ever been in the history of the planet is spending 60% of their advertising budget on television. So there's a disconnect there. And so they're obviously smarter than us. They have figured out something that we don't know. They've got a level of creativity that we're not applying to our businesses. I saw this a couple of weeks ago. 41% of small businesses would rather have a robot do their marketing than a human being. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I'm sure it's a survey of 300 small businesses, and so it's biased in some way. But it should cause us to think. That means that all the marketing activities that we are doing are not respected. And the end result of all the things we are doing is causing customers to behave not in the way we want it to and not delivering a return on investment for our businesses. We were told that analytics was the secret to riches. Analytics is not the secret to riches. Analytics helps us understand how our businesses behave, but then we have to do something with that. And we're not doing enough with the information that we have. I was at a conference a few weeks ago, and the individual sitting at the table with me, she started talking to me, and she says, we don't have an integrated 360-degree view of the customer base, and I don't think we're going to have one for a year or two. So there's no way I'm going to start anything new or try any new initiatives until we have the view of the customer correct. So that's a marketer saying she's not going to do anything for 2 years. Well, how is that business ever supposed to be successful? I mean, that business doesn't have a chance. So we did not win this digital treasure hunt that we were told that would result in all these different riches. I mean, Google won it, Amazon won it, Facebook won it. We're not doing things properly. And then I look at the P&L statements across my client base, because my clients will tell me they don't have money to experiment or to do something new or interesting. So this is an actual example from a client that I work with. And if they did $100 million in net sales, 25% of that is paid to the vendor community that helps them do print and digital advertising. So they're paying $25 million cash every year to their vendor business partners. This company generates 5% of pre-tax sales is profit. So they pay $25 million in cash to make $5 million before taxes. And you take taxes out of there, they're probably taking home a little over $3 million. So their vendor partners are getting anywhere between 5 and 8 times the value out of the business that they're getting for running their own business. And then they don't have any money to spend on doing anything else because they're dependent on their vendor partners to provide all of the marketing activities to help bring them in customers. So I don't understand why we do this. We're constantly focusing on helping other people. At a conference a few weeks ago, I had an individual tell me, she said, my coworkers are not my coworkers. My coworkers are the vendor partners I spend all my time with. I mean, if that's the case, then all the money is going to go to our vendor partners. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad. I'm saying that that doesn't help the core business, and it doesn't make you part of a team of people within your company. Okay? I had a client called FootSmart. They were purchased about 18 months ago. The first thing that the company did who bought them was shut their catalog down, even though the catalog was responsible for 70% of their sales. The buyer of the company paid pennies on the dollar. This company had very little value. It was operating around break even. And the buyer of the company said, we're going to move this company in the future. And how we're going to do that is by shutting down the channel responsible for 70% of the sales. Okay. Now, I don't know if that's good or bad, but that is quite a decision. That's making a change. Most of my clients are going to have a very hard time not mailing one segment of customers because they're afraid to give up the sales from that one segment of customers. Okay? At a conference I was at in March, the organizer asked the room of catalogers, how many of you grew your business by at least 10% last year? Out of 200 attendees, 5 people raised their hand. And so that tells you again that all of the things we're doing and all the things that we've been taught are not delivering the results that we've been told that they should deliver for us. So as a result, I have to think differently about how I help my clients because I can't give the same message always. I can't give the same analytical approach. I can't tell them to optimize all their online marketing and to optimize their print spend and to target customers and really focus on different customers because none of it actually works. If it worked, our businesses would be growing. So they're not growing. So I want to discuss real quick 3 different trends that we need to pay attention to. So these are the things across my client base that have come up repeatedly that I know are causing my clients success. You are probably going to disagree with all 3 of them in some way, and that is fine. But I want you to see them. So the first trend is what I call low-cost and no-cost customer acquisition. So when you work with Google and you pay 50 cents per click, that is high-cost customer acquisition. You're paying 50 cents per click, and then you end up with a 2% conversion rate. You are spending a fortune, and Google is making a lot of money. You aren't getting many new customers, okay? So that's what I don't want to see. I don't want that kind of investment. Across my client base, just under 4 out of 10 of last year's customers buy again next year. In the UK, it's a little bit higher than that. It might be 45 out of 100, but that's a low rate. So that means our customers are not loyal. There are some that are loyal, but on average, our customers are not loyal. They buy from us when they have a need. They go away. They might come back in a year or 2. They might not. And knowing that, and knowing that we have to fill this funnel with 63 additional customers, where should our primary area of focus be? Should be on customer acquisition. If I looked at a typical marketing department today for my catalog client base, 80% of the time they spend is trying to get customers to buy more often. Only 20% is on customer acquisition. It should be a different relationship. It should be 60% of their effort should be on finding new customers and having creative, clever ways to find new customers. I stole this slide from an Amazon presentation. They don't talk at all about anything that you are used to talking about. They talk about to improve the customer experience, you need more traffic. To get more traffic, you need more sellers. More sellers give you more selection, which drives competition, which lowers your cost structure and lowers prices, which brings in a better customer experience, which brings in more customers. And it's a feedback loop. So that's how they view their world. Okay? This is an example of a company that is doing, when I look at their website, they're doing things well. They're making an assumption that customers are coming to the website and already know who this company is, that they already have an idea what size shirt they want to purchase. They already have an idea of the different merchandise categories the customer might want to buy from. So this company is doing things well. And they're basically following a good process that the customer has been qualified from a catalog, comes to the website, and is ready to buy something. But this is different than this. There's a company in the United States called Duluth Trading Company. It is a catalog company. They have tripled their sales over the past 10 years from 70 million in sales to 200 million in sales. You cannot get through a television program in the United States that is sports oriented without seeing a Duluth Trading Company commercial. And so they use humor. So they're featuring underwear here. And they use underwear as the center of their advertising techniques. You can't get away from them. Now you may disagree with their humor, but that's what they're doing. And there are all kinds of examples of companies using these tactics to find customers. This is Yorkie candy bar. It's not for girls. Now, that's a risk. Okay, so I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I want to show you what other people are doing to get attention and try to get customers to come and buy. This is a company called Paul Frederick. They have a shirt that is artificially marked up to $89 that we know is not an $89 shirt, but then they offer it in print ads for $19.95, and I think recently $24.95. A third of their new customers come from this ad. It's a $50 million business. A third of the new customers come from this ad. Okay, so there are different ways to figure out how to find new customers. The customers who come in from this ad have a 1 in 4 chance of buying again. The customers who come in from a catalog have a 1 in 3 chance of buying again. The lifetime value of the catalog customer is probably 3 times as much as it is this customer. So what do you think they do with this customer? They don't mail them catalogs. They just say, fine, we will take the profit off that first transaction and the second transaction that happens within a few weeks, and we just leave it at that. Okay? Socks. This company sells crazy looking socks. They use the socks to get attention. Okay? Adobe. Some of you use Adobe for your web analytics. When they do a podcast, they have a Hollywood actor read the podcasts. I might be more interested in learning about attribution if it's somebody from Hollywood reading about it than me. Okay? This is MailChimp. So some of you may actually work with MailChimp. They do a ton. They do 100 little bitty activities that all are responsible for maybe 1 or 2 or 3% of new customers across the board. And at the end of the day, their business is basically doubling every 2 years. They put in all these small little deposits and do all these small little activities. So I'm asking you to focus on creativity and to go back to some of the marketing things you would have done in the 1990s when you didn't have digital as a tool to fall back on. And to try and be creative and cause customers to have a reason to pay attention to you so that when they're finally ready to buy something, you're first, second, third in their mind, as opposed to you having to pay Google for something. The second thing I want to point out is new merchandise development. This is a graph for one of my clients. This is the number of 12-month buyers they've had over the past 3 years. It's in a death spiral, okay? They are having a hard time getting their business to grow. This graph shows sales of items that have existed for more than a year. And you can see in 2014, 2015, they started the roller coaster down. They discontinued a whole bunch of items that they didn't want to sell anymore. They also then started focusing on new merchandise. And new merchandise is working really well. But at the end of this graph here on the right, that's what happened in the last 3 or 4 months. Somebody in the merchandising department said, these new items is just too much for our company to handle, and we are not going to focus on new items anymore. We're going to go back to trying to get these existing items to sell. And as a result, their sales decreased. So the minute they cut back on new items, their sales fell off a cliff. I see this over and over and over again in all of my projects. When you cut back on new merchandise and don't focus on developing new winning items, the customer gets bored quickly and the business slumps and suffers. I use what I call a comp segment measure to understand this. I take all customers who bought twice in the past year and I measure how much they spend in the next month. Then I shift the data by a month, I repeat the analysis, and I keep doing this over and over and over again for the past 3 years, okay? And that helps me understand that customers are not buying enough on new items. Another table here, I look at what's called a class of report, and I'm able to see that customers are not buying enough on new merchandise. So I need you to focus on new merchandise. Have a plan with it, develop marketing and merchandising partnerships, reward employees, and promote new winning items. I have clients that have a nice partnership between the marketing team and the merchandising team. And when the merchandising team has a good new item, they have the marketing team feature it in email campaigns. And they are able to use email to develop all these new items. The third thing I want you to think about as we wrap up here, commerce to me is going to become more like sports teams and sports entertainment, okay? In sports, the best customers pay for the best seats. They sit at the midfield in a football match. In commerce, the best customers are given discounts and promotions and are being told to spend less. In sports, the biggest events have the most expensive tickets. When there's a Champions League final in football, that's an expensive ticket. In commerce, the biggest events have the biggest discounts again. If you have around Cyber Monday or around Christmas, we are giving away everything we do. In sports, we have big events each week. In commerce, this is a quote from an executive that I work with. She said recently, it's July, we've been saying the same message for 5 months, I'm bored. Well, if she's bored with her own product, why should the customer be excited? In sports, teams are practicing all the time. They're constantly practicing to be better. How many of you in this room practice your job? So you're actually practicing and trying to find ways to do things better on your own. Okay? About 10 hands go up. All of us should be doing something. We should all be practicing. Okay? In sports, players are developed across many different leagues, so when they get to the Premier League, they're really ready to go, right? What do we do to develop our new merchandise at our companies? We don't do a whole lot to develop new merchandise. In sports, we broadcast for free on television. Television networks are paid by advertisers. Customers pay advertisers, so everybody is generating revenue. In commerce, our site is open, we're paying bills. In sports, free broadcasts don't hurt stadium attendance. In commerce, our website is cannibalizing store sales, it's cannibalizing the catalog, and we're struggling. In sports, we use analytics to measure players. In commerce, we're using analytics to measure marketing. How many of you are using analytics, Google Analytics, et cetera, to measure the performance of your merchandise? Okay, not many. So do you see the disconnect? We're not doing things in a way that gives us a chance to succeed. In sports, each team has a philosophy of how they're going to build. In marketing and commerce, we use best practices. We're all trying to do the same thing, just different variations of it so that we're all applying best practices. But why aren't we stepping out and doing something new and unique? In sports, content creates interest, so the customer will either go to a contest or they'll watch on TV or listen on the radio. In commerce, we try to engage the customer. I did a poll on Twitter. I said, would you rather have a customer spend $100 with you or would you rather engage a customer? 52% of the respondents said they would rather engage the customer and not generate any revenue. I mean, on what planet is that even reasonable? The only reason we are in business, we're getting a salary is because we're trying to get customers to buy something from us. But over half of the people on Twitter who are of a younger generation, they're not even thinking that way. They're thinking it's fun to engage people. In sports, the in-stadium experience is different than television. In commerce, we try to make everything the same. We have to stop that. This is at an American football game. They have a swimming pool. So fans can go and swim in a swimming pool. So commerce is going to have to be like sports because we have a dire need for new customers. We have a dire need for new merchandise. And we have a need for entertainment in stores to create a reason so that we are different than Amazon. Amazon is sterile and generic and boring. It's just like walking into a store and grabbing something off of a shelf. It's fortunately convenient and inexpensive. Okay? So these are the three trends I want you to think about as I wrap up. Low cost, no cost customer acquisition programs. Instead of getting all of our customers from, if it's a cataloger, from the co-ops, or from Google or Facebook, we need to have 30 sources of customers that are all generating a portion of our business. We need to be excellent at new merchandise, because what I see across my projects is 80% of the companies I work with have a new merchandise problem that's holding their business back. It has nothing to do even with how digital they are. They just have a problem. And then we need to operate more like sports teams to create interest. With that, I'm done.